Great to see everybody. I'm Wright, President of RAMA and Chairman of the CMC Board of Trustees, and welcome to everybody who I haven't had the chance to say hello to just yet. So glad to have you here at yet another CMC Forum at what is still new, our new home here at the Boathouse at Confluence. So we look forward to having you here as many times as your schedule will allow. Let's jump in for today. Today's forum, we're pleased to present yet another in our series, Best of Columbus, our 40th anniversary celebration forums. Today's forum, Collaborations That Strengthen Us, a recipe for revitalization, is sponsored by our longtime and 40th celebration honorary founders, the Dispatch Media Group, American Electric Power, and WBNS 10 TV, and in partnership with the Columbus Futurists. Won't you help us in welcoming and thanking our sponsors for their support? You know, as we look across our nation, we see that some cities are thriving while others are struggling to keep up. Changing economies, demographics, technologies, infrastructure, even the weather can impact what is desirable and affordable or even possible for a metropolitan area. But perhaps there is a recipe for success, things that might be common denominators that can really make our cities thrive and continue to grow. To talk about these issues and more, we will welcome today's panelists. The President and CEO of CEOs for Cities, Lee Fisher, the Director of Development for our great city of Columbus, Steve Schoeny, and President of Columbus Futurists, History Professor at OSU, and Director of the Goldberg Center for Excellence in Teaching, David Staley. We'll kick off with David and Steve for the conversation, and then, Lee will start with opening remarks, and then be joined by David and Steve for the conversation. Lee, the podium's yours.
Okay, thank you. I was asked today to give a mini keynote, and it also almost became a no keynote. So thank you, Mo. First, I want to say how pleased I am to be back here again and to see many longtime friends. In particular, Steve Schoeny, with whom I'm sharing the stage today. Steve and I worked together at the Ohio Department of Development, and I do want to mention some other people I see here today that I had the privilege of working with during my years of public office. I see Kimber Perfect, Lisa Pat McDaniel, Quentin Harris, Jean Carter Ryan really preceded me, but she's still part of that family, and Terry Geer, who I worked with both in the Attorney General's office and as a state senator, and my apology to anybody I didn't see that I missed. In this mini keynote today, I want to just give you 10 observations about what I'm seeing around the country. As CEO of CEOs for Cities, we are a national nonprofit learning network for cities. The premise is that no city lacks talent, but every city lacks a vehicle for connecting with the smartest ideas and practices in other cities. And when the world's coming at you at lightning speed, you can't afford not to be knowing what cities are doing from Barcelona to Pittsburgh to Portland. The first, of course, is the rise of cities. If you were to come in from outer space and see planet Earth, you would see these vast stretches of desert and water, but as you got closer, you would see these lights. Those lights are our cities. We human beings tend to huddle. For the first time in our history of our planet, more than half the people on Earth huddle together in urban spaces that we call cities. Literally about 65 million people a year, primarily in Asia, are moving to cities. That's the equivalent of 7 Chicagos a year. Urbanization may be the single most important demographic and environmental trend happening in the world today. Number two, my observation is that change happens at the speed of trust. The cities that are doing best around the world, and I'm focusing now today on the United States, are those that are engaging in cross-sector collaboration. They're bringing together the public, private, nonprofit, philanthropic, academic sectors, because no sector can leverage their resources alone and make any difference, but you can move the needle when you all do it together at that intersection. Number three, the cities that are doing best are measuring their progress. They're recognizing that they may not be able to solve problems, but if they see the needle move and they can have achievable, measurable results, That motivates and excites people. Number 4, that cities are realizing that in tough economic times, you must do more with less, but if that's all you do, you're not doing enough. You must also do more for those who have less, meaning that you must have shared prosperity, meaning that you must have inclusive economic growth so that your downtown doesn't rise, but your neighborhoods fall back. Number 5 is that you have to connect your assets. Every city has a set of unique, distinctive assets, physical, human, social capital. And if you can connect those assets as opposed to being an all-star team, being a championship team and actually working together, that's huge. The 6th observation is that density, that Steve Schoeny will talk a lot about because he knows a lot about this, is key, particularly when it is accompanied by innovation. Today around America, there are innovation districts, hubs, corridors of opportunity and innovation where literally businesses and research centers and knowledge centers are all hunkering down together, establishing partnerships, and moving the needle much faster than they otherwise would. That's why community colleges like Columbus State, Ohio State University, Battelle are key economic drivers for a region and a state, and particularly a city. Number 7 is investing in talent, and in some ways that's the first among all equals. If you can find a way to educate and develop and train and retain and attract and employ and deploy your talent, you are a city that will do extraordinarily well. But we are divided into 3 parts in America: the Brain Belt, the cities where young millennials, particularly college-educated millennials, are flocking to, those cities that are on the tipping point, and those cities that are spiraling down. Most of the cities that I work with every day or every week are on the tipping point. They can either go towards the area of Seattle and Austin, or they can go down to cities that are not doing as well because they haven't been able to rebuild on their industrial past. Number 8, find out who you are and do it on purpose. That's the famous line from economist Dolly Parton. And she was right. She said, find out who you are and do it on purpose, meaning that don't try to be the Silicon Valley of the Midwest or the East or the South. Try to be who you are. Be authentic. Be genuine. Number 9, share your story. Don't assume that people will know how great you are. Share the story, speak, and don't play small. And finally, a smart city knows that it has a lot to learn. A dose of humility along with your pride, recognizing that there are always something to learn from another city and another place. The cities that are doing those 10 things are the cities that are succeeding and will be the new 21st century cities. Thank you.
Well, you weren't kidding. That is a mini keynote, isn't it? So I'll put in a plug here on May 2nd on the Barnett Symposium is being held here, and Lee will be giving a full keynote, is my understanding, at the Barnett Symposium. And Steve, I think you're also speaking at Barnett Symposium. What did I say? 12. What did I say? May 12th is what I meant to say. Thursday, May 12th. Thank you, Shoshana. Reactions to what Leah said.
First of all, I do want to compliment Mo for his introduction. When you ask Lee to do a mini keynote, you have to say that he's not doing a keynote, and then you get the mini keynote. If you just asked him to do the mini keynote, you would have gotten a full keynote. So I think you played that absolutely perfectly. My reaction, a couple reactions. First of all, I think I might want to get that list and put it on a wall somewhere in our office because I think it's spot on. I want to do something here as I look out at the crowd that I think is going to reiterate a couple things in here, particularly number 2, which is that change happens at the speed of trust. I'm going to ask for a show of hands. How many folks in the room fit into one of the following categories? An employee of the city, someone who has partnered with the city in something you do as part of your business, or a volunteer on a board that helps serve your community. Just show of hands.
That's amazing.
Wow. That is why we're moving forward. That's also what makes me really nervous, because I know if I screw something up, everybody in the room is going to know I screwed it up when I say it today, because you're all working on this stuff. But that is the key to building trust and moving the city forward. I think when we go around as a city, the level of knowledge and trust that we have with one another in this city is phenomenal. So I worked for 13 years at the Ohio Department of Development. The last three of that time when Lee was there, and I've been around the state. I go to other cities around the country. You don't have that in other places. And that is the fundamental thing, that I can pick up the phone and know that if I call anybody in this room, they will hear me with a sense that we are trying to move in the same direction. And that is fundamental to our power as a city. That's what's going to allow us to take care of those other 9 things. So that's kind of my first reaction to what he had to say.
Lee said that you know an awful lot or think a lot about density. What did he mean by that?
So when we talk about, we think about density in a couple different ways. At the most basic, when we look at the neighborhoods that are successful in Columbus or that are becoming more successful, there are 3 things that we see that those neighborhoods have in common. They're dense, they're active, and they're connected. And those 3 things are interrelated. You have to have people in a place for it to be a place. So you have to bring a certain density, you have to bring the right density to a neighborhood for the kind of community that you're trying to build. It has to be active. People have to feel like it's okay to go outdoors and meet with their neighbors and be with their neighbors and walk to the store and walk to school and have a festival or have a party on the street or do whatever it takes to be active. And they have to be connected. And the connected part is the thing that I think when we talk about the millennial generation, frankly, everybody but me, the millennials and the boomers, when you talk about those groups, the connected is really, really important. And that connected is both physical, it's transportation, it's bike paths, it's, and I would encourage you to come next week to the program about bikes because my colleague Jennifer Gallagher will be part of that panel. It's bike paths, it's investing in our public transportation systems. It's thinking ahead about the future of transportation. And it's also digital connection. So how do we make sure that everyone in this city has access to the rest of the world, which is basically how do you have access to high-speed internet and high-speed connectivity. So we think a lot about it. It's a big challenge. It is, I see a couple folks from a couple of our architectural review boards and area commissions in the room. They are at the bleeding edge of the debate on density in this community. And it's a really important conversation because it's a conversation about how people live today and how they're going to live in the future.
Lee, any thoughts on density or what you see in your travels?
I do, but first I want to acknowledge one more person I just saw in the audience with whom I worked, William Murdoch, who I worked with very closely in the Ohio Department of Development. I think Lisa, I mentioned you, didn't I, Lisa Pat McDaniel? You deserve 2 mentions anyway, okay. The reason density is so important is that many cities around the country are finding that, in a sense, shrinking to a certain geography makes some sense. And what I mean is, Detroit's a good example. Detroit is the size of Manhattan, and it's going to be very difficult to redevelop all of Detroit. But if you can identify a dense geography in downtown along Woodward Avenue and really focus in on that and create an innovation district, all of a sudden you've got everything combining. You got people colliding with each other, both physically and virtually with ideas. So I would say to you that Ed Glazer, who wrote the book Triumph of the City, said, and I'm paraphrasing, it's not enough to attract smart people to your city. If you can't enable them to meet each other, to work with each other, to play with each other, and to collaborate with each other, you don't have a smart city. So it doesn't matter how many college-educated people you have in Columbus if they don't know each other, and you haven't created spaces and opportunities from accelerators to public spaces and urban parks for them to get together, and bike paths, as Steve said, then many, many other cities will pass you by.
Is that what you meant by investing in talent? Is that how cities invest in talent, or how do cities invest in talent?
Well, it starts really, investing in talent is really cradle from career. It's starting with Mark Reel and what you do in the first 5 years of life, particularly with preschool, all the way to what happens with Columbus State, with Terry Geer and Ohio State University, and even beyond that, lifelong learning. And so I always say that workforce development begins with a healthy pregnant mother and a nurtured child. But those are long-term investments. The short-term investments are making sure that we get more men and women to be graduating high school and at least getting some post-secondary credential, even if it's not a 2-year or 4-year degree. But the evidence is very clear that if economists had only one metric in which they could measure the success of Columbus or any other city, I think most economists would agree that the metric would be per capita income, average earnings. And the research shows that the single most important determinant of per capita income, not just of a family, not just of a person, but of a community, is educational attainment. So the more people you have with 2-year and 4-year college degrees, and if you can keep them in your city as well as educate them, you're beginning to develop this pipeline of a skilled workforce that is the key to economic development.
Does that describe Columbus? Do we invest in talent?
It describes where we're trying to go. I think we still got work to get there. And there's a couple things that we're doing on that. When Mayor Ginther has laid out a very strong challenge to us as a city and to us as a community, that we are going to make sure that every child in this community has access to quality pre-kindergarten education. We are creating, and it will open come hell or high water this fall, the first of its kind pre-K center in Linden that will be at bringing together multiple providers into one place to provide a place for children who do not have access to quality pre-kindergarten education. They may have daycare, they may go to a sitter, but they do not have access to high quality pre-kindergarten education. They're going to do that, and we're going to do that. I think that's part of the partnership that we've announced with Ohio State, where Ohio State is going to be supporting education for those educators who look at it as the full spectrum, as Lee said, from pregnancy through retirement. Looking at that, how do we bring in those pre-K educators? The other thing that I'm really excited about is Autumn Glover's here from Partners Achieving Community Transformation on the Near East Side. They have done this fantastic thing on the Near East Side where they've taken the entire feeder pattern for East High School. And they have they've worked with the schools, they've developed an MOU with the schools where health sciences is integrated into every part of the curriculum for every child going through that feeder pattern, from 5 elementary schools and 1 middle school. See, I do listen at our board meetings, and it's so great. At 6th grade and at kindergarten, they have these, and in high school, they have these ceremonies where they give the kids white coats. And if you want to see the cutest thing ever, watch a bunch of kindergartners getting lab coats. But what it does is it gives them a sense of purpose, and it gives them a sense of a career path. And they may end up being a health aide, they may end up being a doctor, but they know what the possibility is, and they know that people are investing in them, not just their parents, not just their grandparents, not just their aunts and uncles and friends, but the community is investing in them, and they see the community believing that they can do great things, and that's what we've got to do.
So, fantastic. How does a city retain talent? And this is talking education opportunities. That's wonderful. How do we keep that educated group in the city? That's for either one of you.
I'll take a first crack at it. We've got it a lot easier than a lot of other places in Columbus because we don't have to attract, we just have to keep in terms of our talent, because we have this little thing up north on 315 and High Street that is called the Ohio State University.
Small college.
Small land grant college that we have up there. And so it really is about keeping the people. And so how do you do that? And it's about, what we are finding is it's increasingly important to create places that connect jobs and housing in the entire picture, because there is the paradigm where you build an office park and you build an industrial park and you build residential and you connect them all with a road is dead. That is dead in terms of the world that I live in. It is integrating those uses, integrating modes of transportation, because that is how you keep the talent. I once had a boss who told stories about his son and his son's generation making the decisions about where they live first versus where they work. And he was right. And it's something we see borne out all the time. And so for us, the talent retention is about having great employers. It's about having great opportunities. But it's, for the city's perspective and our role, it's about creating great places so that you can look out and see something like that. And you have things like the Scioto Greenways project, which this year, which just won an award as the best implementation of a plan by the American Planning Association. We are doing great, world-class things here to keep talent by creating great places.
Was I that boss?
You were.
I thought so, yeah.
You were talking about, I think you were talking about Jason.
I was. And I would like Dave to expand your question and just talk a little bit about talent retention and attraction both, because most cities don't have the advantage of Ohio State and are as focused on attraction as they are retention. Number one, I think we start with the millennial generation, which is 36% of the workforce, and by 2020 will be more than 50% of the workforce. We think of ourselves as a mobile nation, but we really are not. The truth is that there's only one segment of our population that regularly moves. About 1 million millennials move across state borders every year. We did research at CEOs for Cities called The Young and the Restless. And here's an interesting fact we found. We found that although these young and restless are moving across state borders, about 1 million a year, at approximately age 35, they anchor. They marry or they partner, they have or adopt children, and they're not likely to move. So if you are one of those people whose children grew up in Columbus and you want them back, and they are 34 years old, you have 12 months. And Steve is right that that generation, of which both my children are in, go to cities, I would argue actually for two reasons. They go because they want a great city where they, in a sense, prefer subways over driveways, where they prefer drivable suburbanism over walkable urbanism, where they can walk to where they shop, walk to where they eat, where they can live on top of where they walk and shop and eat, and where they have that opportunity to collaborate with others. I also think, however, they're also going where the jobs are, because this is a virtuous cycle. If you think about it, what's the single major reason that a company goes to a city or a state? Steve and Lisa, Pat McDaniel, and I, and others who worked in the Department of Development, I think would all agree that what we found during our years running economic development for the state of Ohio was that all things are important, but the single most important thing is a skilled workforce. And what's the best way to have a skilled workforce? To retain and attract talent. And if you do that, you're going to bring the jobs as well. So it's not really an either or. Do you go to a city for the job or you go to a city for the place? If you're a place that's retaining and attracting talent, it's both, because the jobs will be there.
I'm still just surprised that I remembered anything he said from that time, but.
Steve, you were talking earlier about active cities and cities sort of promoting sort of active lifestyles. What does that mean? I mean, you talk about bike paths and those sorts of things. Can you expand on what you mean by active? And maybe as a follow-up to that, does creating the conditions for activity extend to creating conditions for greater health and wellness for a city?
Yeah, so active is kind of a squishy category in that taxonomy I put out there.
That's why I wanted you to expand.
Thank you for making me define something. It is what makes you active. It's not just about sort of bike paths and physical activity. It's about what you feel on the street. So, and there's different kinds of active. You know, there's one kind of active in the short north. There's another kind of active in Old Town East, and there's another kind of active at Easton. And, you know, there's a different kind of active right out the window here. So it's really about having places where people are going to interact and be together, to what Lee talked about, having those spaces for collisions. There was a second part to your question that I thought was...
Health and wellness, is that...
It's health, it's health and wellness. And I think one of the things that we are finding, 2 years ago, I think the mayor launched his initiative that has become Celebrate One, which is our infant mortality initiative. And what you find when you study infant mortality very closely is that infant mortality, which is, for those who haven't followed it closely, that's losing children before their first birthday. That's why we've named it Celebrate One, celebrate that first birthday. It's not so much, it's a lot about the ABCs of sleep, alone, on your back, and in a crib. Again, I do listen in the meetings. It's also about the social and economic determinants of health. Making sure that people are healthy overall, making sure that pregnant moms have access to health care, but making sure, frankly, that they have stable housing, that they have a job, that they have, that they know they're going to have that they have decent daycare in that first year. It's about that they don't live in a crime-ridden, drug-infested, dirty neighborhood where they don't have access to health. All those things, if you improve a neighborhood, you improve health outcomes. And so when we talk about activity, what we're finding is that as we look at the Celebrate One initiative, it really is kind of the introduction to neighborhood transformation for us. Because doing the things that it takes to have healthy babies is the same things that it takes to have healthy neighborhoods. And so you really, it really is kind of, when you do the active and you do it well, you can do dense and you can do connected. What the active is where you know you've got it right.
So improve a neighborhood, I want to get this right, improve a neighborhood, improve health outcomes. You see that or reactions to that? Lee, is that?
Yes. Organizations like Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, AARP, and others have advanced the notion that being a healthy city is just as important as being a livable city or a smart city, and I couldn't agree more. And we have designed cities for a long time to make it easy to be inactive. Freeways and that take us nowhere or take us to the suburbs, that take us to our garage where we can drive somewhere. The truth of the matter is that the best way to make a healthy community, above and beyond the individual behaviors that are really within our own control, are creating opportunities for people to be active, as Steve has said. Even the notion of having a public space is really not enough. If you build it, they will not necessarily come, meaning that you have to activate that space. I'll give you an example. I'm on the Group Plan Commission in Cleveland that is redesigning Public Square in anticipation of the Republican National Convention that will be coming to Cleveland on July 18th. And it will be a signature space. But we have come to the conclusion that if we don't spend as much time activating and programming that space over the next 10 years, it will be a failure. Project for Public Spaces, a national organization, has talked about something called the power of 10. And that is, active, healthy cities have 10 public spaces in their city. And in each space, there's 10 different things to do. Meaning that you have to, people are now no longer going to destinations, they're going to experiences. They don't just go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they want to be able to experience the lakefront, they want to be able to experience East 4th Street in Cleveland. And that's true in Columbus and every other city. So the key is to create the opportunities, the bike paths, connecting to the water, having public parks, but also giving a lot of strategic thought to activating it so that you just don't assume people come because it's beautiful, because you're creating opportunities all the time for them to be there and to collaborate and congregate together.
I really appreciated Lee's point about authenticity. Is Columbus are we authentic? Do we have authenticity?
Yeah, I think we do, and I think we strive very hard to maintain that. And part of what I like about when you get the amount of involvement that we saw when I asked everybody to raise their hands, and I know a lot of you. I didn't know I should know everybody. But when you get that level of involvement, you see the authenticity that you see happening in places like East Franklinton. We're going to do something really, really creative over there, and I have no idea what it's going to be. And I won't be the one to create it. It will be done by people like Jim Schoeny and Alex Bandar, who are doing the work over there today. And I do want to give a shout out. Lee's done a bunch of shout outs today. I do want to give a shout out to one of my former colleagues who's in the room, who's actually kind of one of the unsung heroes of Franklinton. That's Deborah Price. And if Deborah hadn't fought in Congress to get the Franklinton flood wall built, none of that would be happening. And you know, it takes among our public leaders a vision to create the ability for other people to come in and finish it and finalize it and make it their own. And that's what we're trying to do. I frequently talk about the city doesn't do anything on our own. We can't do anything on our own. It really our job is to come in and create the ability for others to come in and finalize it and make it their own and do the things to take it from being, 80% to being 100%. And so that's how we try and approach it.
So in a few minutes, we'll be moving to audience questions, but I wanted to ask you this, and so I'm a futurist, and so I'm always interested in sort of what's next. Where do you see Columbus, say, in the next 15 years or so? I ask you both this.
You want to go first?
No, I don't want to go first, no.
Work for whom?
You're the Economic Development Director. You should go first.
Never ask a question you don't want the answer to. And that's actually a pretty easy question, which is, number one, I don't know. Number two, it's going to be, I will tell you the things that I do know. I think we will be denser. I think we will be, we have the potential to do great things and really reconnect our community as a whole. And we have the opportunity to have our success be inclusive. But it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of conversations. We are on the cusp of, we're facing a sea change, and it's going to take a lot of community conversation to talk about how do we deal with density? How do we deal? We're going to live closer to one another, and sometimes, that's a little uncomfortable.
Why do you say that with such certainty that we'll be denser?
Because that's what the market demands, and that's what. So William had a speaker, and William Murdoch, and one of these days I'm actually going to remember what his name was, but for their annual meeting a couple years ago, he had a speaker in who I'm going to borrow the line. He said, when we were all kids, the keys to freedom, power, and the opposite sex were your car, right? Today it's this. And where's the one place you can't do this? Behind the wheel of your car. So I have 10 and 12-year-old boys who can tell you exactly what's going on in the NBA playoffs. They can tell you what apps they want. They can tell you the 5 apps that their friends are using. They could not tell the difference between a Mustang, a Camaro, and a Corvette. Or a Ferrari, for that matter. That is a fundamental change in how people look at the world. And it's a very simple, very cute little example. My kids are really cute, so it's even cuter if you saw them. But it's a sea change. And it's when people don't care about their cars and they don't want to be in a car, that means they want to live denser. And so that's why I'm confident that that's the truth.
Since Steve has referred to his children as part of his answer, I've decided I'm going to take that tack too.
I already referred to your children.
And I'm going to talk about Steve's children. Peggy and I have 2 children, Jason and Jessica, and To give you an example of how fast the world is moving, we have about 7 billion people on the planet today. And before we go to bed today, most have said that we'll probably have about 8 billion text messages sent around the world today just before we go to bed in one day. And 42% of those text messages will have been sent by my daughter, Jessica. Now, with regard to our son, Jason, he graduated from college a few years ago, and Peggy and I asked him a question, and his answer was something that in a million years I never would have said to my mom and dad, but I think he was right on. He said, we said to him, what do you want to do now that you've graduated college? And he said, Mom and Dad, what I want to do hasn't been invented yet. But he's right. Today at Columbus State and Ohio State University and universities all around America, we're educating young men and women for jobs that don't yet exist using technologies that haven't yet been invented to solve problems that even the smartest people don't know are problems. But that is the great future of Columbus. Because with Ohio State University and Columbus State and Battelle, you have a leg up on many other cities that I'm in all the time. Steve Case, the founder of AOL, coined the phrase, the rise of the rest. And what he means by that is we often talk about Boston and New York City and Chicago and San Francisco and how great these cities are. But what I've observed and what he has observed as well is that the mid-sized cities around America, many of them, including Columbus, Ohio, are the ones that you should be watching. So I actually think that the future of Columbus is extremely bright, not just because you had a great mayor and you now have a great mayor, not just because you have a great economic development director, or, well, 2 out of the 3 you have, and but also because this city...
Coleman's going to be very upset with you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, very funny. But also because this city has the assets that others yearn for. The fact that you have this place that is central in America, central in the heartland, central in Ohio, phenomenal with logistics because of your location, phenomenal because of the Edison Centers and Ohio State University that are here on the cutting edge of technology, and because you have a community that is like a big small town where you actually do trust each other often and work with each other, I think the sky's the limit for Columbus, and I wouldn't be surprised if in 10 or 20 years the front page of Time magazine is Columbus, City of the Century.
Excellent. I like that, yes. Do we have audience questions? If so, the microphone is over here, so make certain you're in front of the microphone. It is CMC's tradition to take audience questions. As you walk to the microphone, please state your name, ask your question, and we thank you in advance for not making long editorial comments. First question, please. Shoshana.
Hi, my name is Shoshana Goldberg Miller, and it's wonderful to be here today. So first of all, in the spirit of the Columbus Metropolitan Club continuing the conversation, I first want to thank you, David, for shouting out our 2016 Barnett Symposium coming up May 12th. So you can, Google that and find it. It's actually going to be talking about creative cities, and all of the speakers on our panel today will be included on our roster that day. So I have a question for Lee and for Steve. What do you see as the role of the creative sector, both the for-profit and the nonprofit, in revitalizing the cities that you've visited in the US and around the world, Lee? And Steve, what is its role here in Columbus?
Well, first, Shoshana, I want to do a shameless promotion just like you did. CEOs for Cities National Conference will this year be in Columbus, Ohio. It'll be September 27th to the 29th. The first presidential debate will be on Monday, September 26th in Dayton, Ohio. And the next day, our national conference will begin, so we think we have a better than even chance of getting the Democratic and Republican nominees, and perhaps also the third-party nominee, given the way things are going. We're working very closely with Doug Kreidler at the Columbus Foundation, and we invite all of you to mark those dates on your calendar. We'll be bringing in nationally known speakers as well as celebrating the successes of Columbus. I have no idea what your question was. I can't remember, but let me give an answer anyway.
Creative cities.
Yes, creative cities, right. Often we talk about STEM, science and technology and education and math, and that actually is a wrong way to look at it. It should be STEAMed. The A is for art and the D is for design, meaning that if you don't have a culturally rich city that is creative, that has an arts culture and a creative culture, then you will fall behind. And those are just as important, not less, not more, just as important as science, technology, education, and math. And the cities that are creating arts and culture corridors, whether they're based on music, like Nashville and Austin, whether they're based on art, like the Windward Art District in Miami, I can give you time after example. Those cities are alive. And in some ways, the best single way you can capture the soul of a city is to tap into its creative DNA, which more often than not comes in two sectors, the innovation sector, the technology sector, and the arts and culture sector. And if you can marry those two, you've got a very exciting city.
You know, I think the role in Columbus is going to it's going to be interesting. I would have two comments. One, I think the arts and creative industries will continue to be important. Columbus and Central Ohio have the third largest concentration of fashion designers in the country, behind only, is it LA and New York, or New York and San Francisco, one of the two. Yeah. That's right, we're ahead of San Francisco. So creative isn't just small. It's two things. Number one, it's not just small. Number two, it's not just what we think of as the creative industries. You know, the banking industry, the insurance industry, all rely on creative people, and part of our effort to create spaces, and is to have places for those people to have an outlet.
Creative banking could be a problem, though, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Marie Trudeau. I'm with W.E. Davis Insurance, and thank you for being here today. Almost 100 years ago, my grandparents, along with a lot of other people, helped develop a camp in southern Ohio, Camp Wyandotte in their case, because they were afraid the kids were losing touch with nature. That was 100 years ago. And as the cities become more and more dense, the kids don't know their food comes from the ground, or that there are stars that you can't see in the city. I mean, our parks are great, but what can we do about the kids being in touch with the earth? Thank you.
Well, I would say that in all the talk about most of the gross domestic product being created in urban environments and more than half the people living in cities, one could get the impression that rural areas are not important, and nothing could be further from the truth. One of the great things about America is that we have these choices. With the world, we have choices. And I know many people who believe that the best balance in their life is to live in a dense city, but also have a place that they can go to where they can be alone and have some solitude and be able to commune with nature. And so it's not an either-or proposition. But I will say this to you. And this is not in direct answer to your question, but it's a point I think worth making. When we think about lowering our carbon footprint, we think about putting a solar panel on our house, or we think moving out to the country. But the truth is, if you want to have a low carbon footprint, you should move to the city. Because the truth of the matter is all that density means that costs go down, and that the environmentalists have found that the lowest carbon footprints are in our urban cities simply because of the fact that they're using less energy because of that density. So that's not an answer to your question, but I would say to you that just as we often need to unplug from our devices, sometimes we need to unplug from our cities. And I think we should be doing that, in other words, celebrating the important economic engines of our future, our cities, but also celebrating what America still looks like when you look at trees and water and be able to spend time there too.
Yeah, I think as a city, I mean, our role is really to create the spaces for that to happen, and that's having great parks, that's having great open spaces, and that's having connectivity to other places. You know, and then again, as I said before, I got 10 and 12-year-old boys. You know, as a parent, you just have to do it. You have to make them get out there and do it.
Sir.
Yeah, I broke it. Okay. My name is Robert Caldwell, and I'm the Executive Director of AnswerPoverty.org. And I know, Steve, you and your team are aware of the work that we do in the community. And I really appreciated your comment about improving neighborhoods and you'll improve health outcomes. But I want to add to that, you improve outcomes in all kinds of areas if you improve neighborhoods. Education, employment, all of those things are connected to improving neighborhoods. My question, however, is for Lee. The work that I do and then my organization does and many of us in the room do is to work with those folks who didn't have a healthy pregnant mother and a nurtured childhood, who, through no fault of their own, start off well behind the 8 ball relative to careers and advancement and education and all that. And I'm aware of a lot of the work that we're doing here in Columbus. Can you speak to things that are going on in other cities from your perspective that are attempting to engage and enfranchise those disenfranchised folks because of how they were born, where they were born, and all of that, creating opportunities, engaging workforce, and all of that? Can you speak to that?
Yes. For 7 years, I ran a nonprofit organization in Northeast Ohio called the Center for Families and Children, and that was really our mission. And that our premise was that if you're creating a network of success in our disadvantaged neighborhoods and empowering them, that is economic development too. And I often said to the men and women who worked at the Center for Families and Children, you're really not human service professionals, you're economic development professionals, because you're giving tools and skills to young men and women who haven't had those in the past and letting them to be able to be productive members of the workforce in the future. And I will say to you that the single most important trend in cities today is this notion of inclusive economic growth and shared prosperity. We have found, to our surprise, that a rising tide does not lift all boats. Or if it does, some are on yachts and some are in dinghies. And that you therefore need to have a disproportionate share of your attention, both to the children and to the neighborhoods themselves, making sure that, as Steve said, they're connected to affordable housing, that they're connected to first-class education, both preschool, primary and secondary, and higher education, that they're connected to transportation and as many multiple forms as possible, particularly transit in all its forms. And when you create a neighborhood that's connected to its city, that's connected to other neighborhoods, and is connected to opportunity like affordable housing and education, those are the cities that are doing the best. And I would say to you, in every city I go to, there are examples of using what's called collective impact, using the private, public, private, and philanthropic sectors to bring money to the table to focus on this issue that you've talked about today. I was in Greensboro, North Carolina the other day, and there's this fabulous nonprofit called Say Yes to Education that said, we'll put $15 million into your community if you can show us that you have a cross-sector approach to making sure that every child has a decent education. And I'm seeing it in Buffalo, I'm seeing it in Greensboro, I'm seeing it everywhere. In fact, there are very few cities where this is not happening, some better than others. But the answer is that even though we tend to get on the front page the names of the companies that we attract or the buildings that we erect, in the long run, we'll be judged by the neighborhoods that we've left behind and made sure that they are strong and they are vibrant.
That's good. Yeah, thanks.
Do you want to, oh, yes, please.
Hi, Mark Allen, editorial. My question was already asked, but I didn't want to seem like I was chickening out and sit back down. And then they keep taking pictures, and so it's kind of nice. But let me take Shoshana's question and maybe focus it a little bit. She asked about the creative support for the creative sector. My question is more about the performing arts, more specifically. As the millennials move back downtown for the bike paths, they discover opera, they discover ballet, and how do are we doing enough to support that sort of that thing that attracts people to a city, and what more can we be doing or should we be doing to prepare for for what I assume is going to be growing demand down the road?
So I'll be very careful how I answer this. I think, just because I don't want it to turn into something that says that the city needs to be giving more money to anything, we can always be doing more. I think we have to do more to look to find creative solutions for arts organizations. And some of that is funding, some of that's making sure we're serving as the connective tissue between organizations, and sometimes really kind of trying to get over the humps of who's got what. But there's always more we can do because it's vitally important.
Two ways that I've seen cities handle this. One is creating their own exclusive funding stream. Cleveland being an example where they have created a number of years ago, back in 2006, I think it was, 1% to the arts, meaning that what they did is they increased the sin tax, and the amount that the sin tax on cigarettes and tobacco was increased was all funneled to the arts community. And a board was created, and every year arts organizations are getting exponentially more than they ever would have before because of that earmark funding. Another way to do it is to create a signature event. And a good example of that is Grand Rapids, Michigan. Grand Rapids, Michigan is not necessarily on people's radar as a great city, but the truth is it's one of those rise of the rest I talked about. They created something called Art Prize, which is arguably the most democratic art prize competition in the world, because the people who vote on the art are the people who are in the city and visit the city during those 3 weeks. When you are in Grand Rapids during Art Prize, it looks like a European city. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and everywhere you go, both outside and inside, are works of art, everywhere. And rather than have it be judged by esteemed artists, it's judged by anybody who wants to simply register and cast their vote while they're in town. And as a result, what's happened is it's not just 3 weeks of booming activity. It's created an arts culture year-round as a result.
Last question to you, Bill.
Hi, I'm Bill Lafayette. I'm an economist who is interested and focused on communities. We got a statistic late last year, early this year, that I'll pose in a very positive way. We have an opportunity in Columbus to enhance the economic diversity of our neighborhoods. So I'd like for you to talk a moment about how important economic, social, cultural diversity is in an individual neighborhood, and how we as a community do that enhancing.
Go ahead.
And I'm going to give credit to CEOs for cities for they had one of their cluster workshops in Pittsburgh last year. Mm-hmm. And I don't like the word diversity. I like the word inclusion. And I think that making sure, because we have lots of different kinds of people here in this city, we need to make sure that we're including everyone in the conversation. So with that change to your question, the opportunities, we don't succeed as a city unless we get inclusion right. We don't succeed as a city unless the kid growing up on the hilltop walks out and sees his future as bright as anybody else. And there's a lot of work to be done in that. And that gets back to what I talked earlier about. There is no single element to it. It really is looking at how do you make a place safe and healthy for everyone. And that's about creating great neighborhoods, because in an environment where we're increasingly going to be, our growth will be constrained by our workforce, leaving people in the shadows is not only a sort of moral failing, it's an economic failing.
I want to pick up on what Steve said. If there were one thing that I could focus on that makes a great city, I would say the magic is in the mix. And what I mean that is not just mixed use, which is very important, not just mixed income, which is extremely important, but mixed experiences and mixed culture. That is diversity, is inclusion. And the interesting thing is the research shows that diversity and inclusion are not just the right things to do from a moral standpoint, they are the right things to do from an economic standpoint. Research is very clear that cities actually perform better and are more productive and have higher per capita incomes when they are more diverse. So although we should be doing it because it's the right thing to do morally, the truth of the matter is it's just as important to argue that it's the right thing to do economically, and it truly is.
Excellent. Thank you both. Mo, to you.
We know you enjoyed today's forum. Do know that you can always rewatch our forums on Columbus Television, on WOSU, through PBS affiliates throughout the state, and on our YouTube channel via the CMC website. Let's thank again our sponsors, Dispatch Media Group, American Electric Power, and WBNS 10 TV. Our partners, Columbus Futurists, and finally to our speakers, Lee Fisher, Steve Schoeny, and David Staley. Thank you so much for today's forum. We'll see you next week. Thank you very much.